My name is Gerald Edward Ballow. I was born May 15th, 1932, a little town of Cannelton, Indiana. It's on the Ohio River, August 1949. My first permanent assignment was with General MacArthur's headquarters in Tokyo. All records were being reviewed, and they were looking for guys that were 6 foot tall, had a good record up to that time, had an IQ of 110, I believe it was a cutoff. And their records indicated that they had never been in trouble and had the potential for being a good soldier. We shipped out of Seattle, Washington, Pier 92 or 93, I think it was, on board a troop ship. I don't remember the name of it. I hope I never recall it because it was the worst experience I went through in my life. A troop ship is not recommended for a cruise. The first I heard of Korea, I was in the orderly room as assistant charge of quarters on Sunday, June 25th, 1950. I was listening to the radio. Radio Tokyo was just a couple of blocks away, and I was listening to some nice music, doing my clerical duties, and there was an interruption. North Korea had invaded South Korea, blah. Well, that's the first time I heard the word Korea. It sounded Asian to me, and the first thing I thought was, good God, is that northern Japan? I had no idea where Korea was. The sergeant that was charge of quarters was down having lunch. When he came back, I asked him, where in the devil is Korea? I said, there's a broadcast on there, North Koreans have invaded. And he said, I don't know, never heard of it. Well, it was that evening, Stars and Stripes put out a special edition. It had a map up, as I recall, on the first page. That's the first time I saw or heard of Korea. Ginza was the big attraction for us. I never saw anything like it in my life. The sidewalks were, I don't know if they did it deliberately or not, but they were broader than normal. And right on the edge of the sidewalk, at the gutter, they would have all these little canvas tents set up, selling you anything you can possibly imagine. We used to joke that the little mechanical toys that we bought were made out of GI beer cans. And I can believe it, because we emptied a lot of beer cans. But that's where you learn to barter, and that's where you learn your first Japanese, and bartering with these salesmen. They had two things that I remember in particular. They had a cigarette lighter. Every GI carried, whether he smoked or not, I think, carried a Zippo lighter. Yeah. The Japanese imitation of the Zippo was much better. There was a fountain pen called the Penguin, and I don't know why I can remember that name, but it was the Penguin fountain pen that was copied after the Parker, and it was better than the Parker. And I think we spent $1.50 for one of them. It was unbelievable. I've always said that every 100 years, this country produces a godlike figure. In the 1700s, we had George Washington. In the 1800s, and many people disagree, I think it was Robert E. Lee. In the 1900s, it was Douglas MacArthur. The man, if he had been born in the time of the Greeks and Romans, they'd have made him a god. He ruled that country. They had an emperor, but MacArthur was the ruler. But he was very benevolent to the Japanese. He wanted them to get off on the right foot, and everything he did was with them in mind. At least that's the way we saw it. If you served in his headquarters or in one of his units, you had the highest of respect for him. Those who badmouth MacArthur are those who never met him or never served directly under him. I met him. I got in trouble, as usual. I was only there 2 weeks. Had my uniform all tailored up, and I was looking good. It must have been close to payday because Lieutenant Hagman took me with him, as I recall. Yeah, he was the orphanage collection officer that month. So he was taking the money to the finance to deposit it. And he told me, come on, we'll show you around. Been there 2 weeks. And he went into the finance, and I said, you know, they got a movie in the Daiichi building, haven't they? He said, yeah. I said, I'm going to see that movie. I got on the elevator and I got off the wrong floor. I got off on the 6th floor. And I'm looking around. I don't see any theater up here. I must have missed it. I think it was in the rear of the building on the 5th floor, I believe. And I started to walk towards the elevator again, and down the hall comes Douglas MacArthur and his entourage. He's got a half a dozen colonels and lieutenant colonels following him. They're all having a conversation with each other and with him. And I just stood up against the wall at attention. As he got near, I said, good morning, General. He looked over and says, good morning, young man. And I like to shit in my pants. Now what do I do? You know, 5-star general talking to me. What do I do now? And how are you this morning, General? Fine. You look like you lost, son. I was looking for the theater, sir. It's down on the other floor in the back of the building. And he said, you plan on attending the movie? I said, I hope to this evening, sir. Fine. Enjoy your movie. And he walked on. You should have seen the stares that I got. Like, wow, who is this brash young man to dare talk to the general? And they all walked on by. Well, I went out. I met up with Lieutenant Hagman. And I told him what just occurred. And he said, you did what? He jumped all over me. Don't you know that you're not supposed to talk to the general unless he first talks to you? I said, no, sir, I had no idea that was the rule. I didn't. 6-7 months in the Army, nobody ever told me this. I just thought I was being polite. Well, I learned then you don't talk to the general unless he first speaks to you. Hagman got upset at me. We got back to the company, and of course he had to tell the first sergeant. The first sergeant just busted out laughing. He was all for it. Hey, that's the way to go, Ballow. Nice going. But that was the first time I ever personally had a chance to talk to him. I saw him many, many times after that, of course. His vehicle would pull up in front of the Daiichi building, and everything stopped. There would be hundreds of Japanese and Americans too, gather outside that building to see MacArthur arrive or depart. They seemed to know when he was going to leave. And the Japanese would be bowing to him, and the Americans would stand at attention, saluting him. He was treated, many years later learned the term shogun. He was the shogun. He was the military ruler. But everything he did was to get that country off on the right track, and he did it. And I'll say it, and I don't care who in the Department of the Army don't like it. They were jealous the hell of him because of what he had accomplished and what he could accomplish. And I think that was part of the problem of him being relieved many years later, that jealousy. When we got word, and we got the word within a week that we were going in, so by the 1st of July, we knew that the American troops were going to be sent into Korea. Everything changed in GHQ. We went on a wartime basis footing, whereas before your job may be 8 hours a day, it was not unusual now that staff sections worked 24 hours a day, worked around the clock. Training before Korea was a joke. Character guidance, current events, and the mandatory subjects. After the war started, FM 7-10, a basic infantry company, became the Bible for training, teaching the paragraph troopers, as we called ourselves, how to conduct combat actions. It became combat training. It was still only 4 hours a week, but the emphasis was now on military action rather than current events. We all knew, well, first of all, the word came out they were going to form a special unit. There were hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. I can't begin to tell you the number of guys. I volunteered, and Lieutenant Hagman told me, he says, no uncertain terms, you're not going, period. But he handed me a list. He told me to contact each man personally, have him here by noon Saturday. I need to talk to him. That was when they were getting serious. This would be the first part of July. So this is like the war is only 2 weeks old. I contacted all of them. Many of them volunteered, some did not. They formed the book I gave you there, a soft cap. They formed the GHQ Raider Company. But things in GHQ and things throughout Tokyo were completely different once that war started. Our sole objective on anything was Korea. First, last, and above all, Korea. It was a wholly, entirely different atmosphere. We formed that company. We also formed the 10th Corps headquarters out of personnel assigned to GHQ. I don't know how many guys we shipped over, but our company was greatly reduced in number. I won't say 50%, but it was an enormous number of guys were taken for this company and for 10th Corps headquarters. We did everything we could to support Korea. I guess one of the hardest things that I went through at that time was seeing the messages that came in the morning, casualty messages. If somebody that had been in your company and had gone over there as a replacement or volunteered, a lot of guys went and just volunteered for any combat unit. If that happened, we were notified. It later happened to Lieutenant Hagman. He volunteered for the Raiders. I volunteered for the Raiders. He said, "You're not going, but I am." Well, his wife was pregnant, so he got a deferment. He didn't go until March of the next year. In April, the Raiders disbanded, and he got it reassigned to the 2nd Infantry Division, and he was killed in May. He was killed the day after my birthday. I remember being in the supply room at the time, and the first sergeant came in, and I could see the look on his face, something was wrong. What's the matter, Top? He's like, "A bad news." I said, "What's that?" "Carl's dead." That hurt. The training, as I said, changed completely. We knew there was going to be a landing of some sort somewhere. And I said that was Operation Common Knowledge, part of the deception plan. We didn't know that it was on or where it was going to be. I guess when it happened, it probably surprised us as much as it did the North Koreans. My knowledge comes from keeping track of where the raiders were. We knew that raid in Kunsan was part of the deception. It had to be. It was, you don't send one company in to make an invasion. We just didn't know where, so it came. I think it came as a surprise to us. When it happened, it came as a surprise to us. We knew something was about to happen because I was on duty again in the orderly room late one night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. A major walked into our orderly room and handed us a list. He said, "These guys have been pre-briefed on this, so they're going to be expecting it. Wake them up and get them ready to ship by breakfast." That was the 10th Corps headquarters group that we sent over. Later I learned that probably around the 8th of September, 8th or 9th of September, he might have left around that time. Aboard the McKinley, I think it was. I'm sure it was. So he left about a week early. But nobody knew. Because he was God. He could come and go as he pleased. And if he wasn't there, well, he's somewhere else. That's all.
So when did he come back to headquarters?
About a week later. Around the 30th of the month, I guess. So he was gone for a couple of weeks. I think he stayed there until Seoul was taken, and then he flew back to. Yeah, because we retook Kimpo Airfield on the 19th or 20th, and the plane, they used that airport for his airplane. And so he came back around the 3rd, so he was gone a couple of weeks. And nobody would miss him. His hours were so strange. I mean, he may come to work at 7 o'clock today, and he may not come to work until 7 o'clock tonight, the next day. He worked when he damn well pleased. When his schedule would allow him, he would show up at the Daiichi building. And the headquarters continued to march right along, with or without him, because they knew what he wanted, and there was no doubt about what he wanted.
When did you hear about the success of Incheon Landing?
Soon.
What was the mood there in the headquarters?
Unbelievable. Of course, MacArthur's doing it. It had to succeed, but it was just jubilation. You know, it was a feat accomplished. Everybody said it can't be done there, and you don't tell MacArthur it can't be done. In fact, that's pretty much the attitude of his entire headquarters and staff, I believe. It wasn't, don't say it can't be done. How are we going to do it? It was get the job done. And I think that pretty well permeated the thinking of everybody assigned to GHQ. And I always tell guys that in later life, that's pretty much the attitude that I had on something. Just get it done. I don't care how you do it, just get it done. It served me well for 30 years. Now, when we were told, and of course we were told instantly, that the guys were ashore and moving inland, it was jubilation. We were, well, this war is over. We thought the 38th parallel would be it. When they decided to go above it, some concerns started appearing. We're thinking, you know, if we lose this many defending, and we lost this many retaking Incheon, what the hell is the casualty rate going to be? We tried to take all of North Korea. We expected one hell of a fight. And we were concerned about it. Not so much that so we're going to call it off. I don't think anybody ever said that. But there was concern in a general sense. It's a whole new war. Now we're on the offense. We're being the aggressors, as the North Koreans said. I'm going to tell you my personal opinion, and I've said it before, I hesitate to use their names, but I will. I think that George Marshall and Omar Bradley were jealous to hell of Douglas MacArthur. And that's the reason Douglas MacArthur got relieved. It was not Truman, it was them demanding get the emperor out of there. And I say that because not what happened then, what happened immediately after that. We wore the GHQ patch. The attitude in Washington is there can only be one GHQ, one general headquarters, and that's us. When MacArthur left, that patch disappeared. That's the first thing they said, dispose of that patch. In fact, as I recall, in the election campaign, it was Dwight Eisenhower said that. Check back on Eisenhower's speeches during that time, and I think you'll see that he said he would go to Korea. He would end that war. If necessary, he would use the atomic bomb. All MacArthur wanted to do was to knock out the air bases in Manchuria, which were being used as safe havens. That's all he wanted to do. The bridges spanning the Yalu River, we could only bomb the south end of the bridge. We couldn't bomb the north end. Well, that's nonsense. You bomb the damn bridge. I don't care where you hit it. But no, I don't recall any mention of atomic weapons until Eisenhower said it during his campaign. So I think it was him. And I don't think MacArthur, he knew the effect of that atomic bomb. He had seen the effect of that atomic bomb. No.
One of the most fatal disaster in MacArthur's operation was not to notice that the Chinese were already across the Yalu River in the middle of October. And he was pushing north toward, and that's how we got the chosen few screwed up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know of anything about that?
It was an intelligence disaster. They knew the Chinese were there.
You knew? How?
Willoughby knew it. General Willoughby knew it. I'm sure you check G2 records of GHQ, you'll find out they knew that the Chinese were massing across the river.
When? You mean they knew
in
that
October.
they crossed the October?
In October, yeah. I think the guys are wrong, but the raiders were operating in North Korea at that time. One of the guys said they sent a platoon north, all the way to the Yalu River. This was in late October, early November. They ran in, they were all the way to the Yalu River. Because one of them says, "What's the matter, didn't you get to pee in the Yalu?" And he said, "I bet that'll make those Chinese across the river unhappy." They knew the Chinese were over there. Well, they ran into a little skirmish with an outfit. Didn't know who they were. The raiders had a couple of South Korean intelligence people with them. After the skirmish, they pulled back, and the question was, who in the hell were those guys? The South Korean intelligence agents turned to the sergeant first class in charge of the patrol and says, they were not Korean, I can tell you that. They were Chinese. So our raider patrol ran into a Chinese patrol late October, early November on the Yalu River, near the Yalu River. I really don't think that they were on the Yalu. That's too far north for a patrol to get. I think they were on the Taedong west, just south of the Chosin Reservoir. I think that's where they were, where the incident actually occurred. But if so, that means the Chinese were already past the Yalu, past the Chosin, and in between 8th Army and 10th Corps already. There wasn't much they could do. They were so completely overwhelmed, outnumbered. I mean, they came down through there like a bunch of ants. Everywhere you look, there's 10,000 of them coming at you. There wasn't much they could do except defend yourself the best way you can and pull back. What is the old saying? Fall back 100 yards, dig in, and save the equipment. That's about all they could do. The numbers were overwhelming. I don't think there was much they could do except defend the best way possible. We didn't have any additional troops that we could send up there. They sent, we'll show you how bad it got. They sent the 7th Division was already there. I'm trying to think what battalion, either 2nd or 3rd Battalion that was wiped out. They had to replace them, so they moved another battalion of the 7th Division up in that area. To replace them, they put the Raider company, a company to replace a battalion. That's how thinly scattered they were. So there just wasn't anybody to, there were no additional troops. I went to Camp Carroll in Wagon from 66 to 67.
You said Wagon, right?
Wagon, yeah. And I was at Camp Howells from 72 to 73.
Where was that?
Camp Howells is, well, you'll never find the town. The little town right outside the gates called Bongochan. It's in the Paju district up north. My outfit was responsible for the entire western corridor, including the DMZ. Paju, P-A-J, yeah, Paju. We were responsible for the entire western corridor and the DMZ.
What do you think is the legacy of Korean War and the Korean War veterans? If you consider the relationship, the strongest alliances between U.S. and Korea now.
That's the one blessing of that war, was the friendship that was cemented between the Korean people and the Americans. I have never been treated so good in all my life, especially, I think the last time I was there was 72, 73. I was older than all my investigators. I could walk down into the village and they would see me, realize my age, and the first thing they wanted to know was, "You stay Korea?" Yeah. And they wanted to know when and where, and come on, have a drink with us. Gerald E, which I hate that damn green tea. I hate that stuff. But I was never treated so well in all my life. Even the little kids, we had an orphanage that we took care of. They loved us. And it was genuine love. It wasn't, well, they're taking money, they're taking care of it. No, we took good care of them, and they, in return, any way they could, they wanted to play with us. They wanted to be with us all the time. They had never had cheeseburgers in their life. I took 2 or 3 of them to the Post snack bar one Sunday morning. And I told the lady, I said, "I want cheeseburgers and I want everything on them." And she brought them over, and they're looking at these things, these strange things. And I said, "What do you want?" "I want a knife." "What do you want a knife for?" "Cut." "No, you pick it up and eat it like it's." "My hands?" "No, no, 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 no." I finally came, I said, "Look," and I got mine, I'm starting to eat. He copied me. He never made such a mess. I've seen a kid make such a mess in all my life. He had tomatoes laying here and onions laying over there. The first cheeseburger he had in his life, and he loved it. So we took care of the kids. But like I said, even when I'd walk the street, and even the old ladies, I could speak a little Japanese and a little Korean, and between the two of us, between our broken language, we'd make ourselves understood. But I was never treated so well in all my life. That's the legacy, the blessing of the Korean War, was that friendship that developed between the two countries. And I believe it's genuine too. I never ran into any jealousy or any dislike for Americans anywhere I went in South Korea. Like I said, the DMZ was on the last tour I was over, the DMZ was my responsibility. Even the North Koreans. Don't let them fool you. They're solid as that wall when they're being observed. But when they're not, they're just as friendly as they can be.
Why do you think that there was sort of a prejudice about too much emphasis on Japan, but not too many other Asian countries in Asia? Any of those?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But it's only a matter of the fact is nobody knew. I didn't know anything. Korea? What the hell's a Korea? Nobody knew about Korea. We made a big mistake, and I'll probably get Secret Service knocking on my door for saying this, but we made a big mistake in World War II in supporting the Chinese nationalists. Had we supported Mao, China today would not be communist. It would be socialist, but it would not be communist. I think we would have had without Mao in China, we'd have had 19 or 20 separate little Chinas. All the regimes would have broken up. But we supported the nationalists, and because we supported them, Mao turned against us. But the bias was nobody knew Korea. And of course, when we were at war with Japan, then the occupation, the emphasis was there. That's all that was. Had we been at war with China, and we had defeated them, and we gone in and occupied them, China would have been an emphasis instead of Japan.
U.S. joined the Western imperialism against all other part of the globe. England, France, Germany, all over Asia. They occupied it, they made it as a colony. United States joined in early 20th century, Theodore Roosevelt, and he was regarding the Japan as the only non-white, non-Christian, but Eastern Yankees, because Japan was able to defeat China and then Russia in 1905. So that actually President Theodore Roosevelt sent his Secretary of War Taft to Japan to meet with Prime Minister Katsura and gave the Korean Peninsula to Japan while asking Japan not to interfere with the Philippines. So that the General MacArthur's father actually, landed there and occupied the Philippines. Any message to younger generations?
I don't know what it would be other than for them to study it carefully, not just one source, but all sources. Read, if they can find it, any books written by the Korean people. Read the histories of the war that the Chinese have put out. There are some eye-opening things in there. Study. Don't just accept what you see or hear. Study it. Really study. I enjoyed my studies of East Asia because I learned things I had no idea. That's the beginning of civilization as far as I'm concerned. When I write a book and I need a Korean word for something or the Japanese word for something, I got my books right there to look it up. But like you say, if you don't use it, you lose it.
The Korean War has been like this for 60 years. Next year will be 60 years anniversary of Korean War. No war ever lasted 6 years after an official ceasefire in 20th century history. I know there is a problem in North Korea, but some say that enough is enough. I want to wrap this up. While we want to replace the armistice with the peace treaty. If there is a petition like that, would you be willing to sign it?
I would. I think if I were President of the United States, I would push to take that DMZ and demolish it immediately. Let the North Korean people see for themselves what the South has done. It's unbelievable. I just can't see millions of people in North Korea living under those conditions year after year after year, when just south of them, that's almost a paradise. I know I'd do away with the DMZ and just tell them, hey, come south, visit us. If you want to, no politics is the only thing I'd ask of them. When the war started, it became obvious from the shape of Korea that what was needed were Rangers, or Ranger-type units. At the end of World War II, the military, the Army and the Marine Corps, disbanded all Ranger units. There were none when the Korean War started. A call went out from GHQ to form such a unit immediately. Problem is, where do you get them? Where do you get the troops? MacArthur is alleged to have said, hell, get them right out of my headquarters. They can do the job. So the call went out to GHQ for volunteers. And they've got hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. A group of men were selected and sent to Camp McGill. They were called at that time the Provisional Raider Company, Special Activities Group. They were trained to make offshore incursions, I should call them, to disrupt communications, disrupt transportation. In other words, Ranger and Raider type raids, blow up bridges, that type thing. 120 guys were finally selected, and 6 officers, I believe it was. They were sent to Korea 12th of September, 1950, conducted the deception raid at Kunsan. Lost 3 men that night. No one really knows to this day exactly what their mission was supposed to be. Some say it was a beach recon. Some say it was just a deception raid. Well, we lost 3 men. We lost 1 lieutenant and 2 corporals that night. 2 days later, their job was to go into Incheon The original plan was for them to take Womido Island with 2 companies of Marines. General Smith, O.P. Smith, in charge of the Marines, says, like hell, I can't afford to give you 2 companies. And you get the hell off of Womido, we're going to take it ourselves. So the next plan was what they called Operation Impossible. Send the raiders into a place 8 miles north of Incheon the night before the invasion. Their mission was to cross those mud flats. How they're going to do it, nobody knows. March inland and take Kimpo Airfield, 15 miles away. The only problem was, right in front of them was a regiment, a security regiment, North Korean security regiment. They'd have been wiped out if they'd tried it. Thank God for the intelligence of Korean Navy officers. The ship that we were on, and I always say we because they've made me an honorary raider. The Navy captains, the Korean Navy captain says, there's no way in hell you can get in there. They'd already transferred from the English ship they were on to the Korean ships to take them in, and then they're going to be dropped into rafts that they use, these 10-man rafts, to paddle in. Somebody forgot to tell them about those 1,000 yards of mud flats. No proper intelligence was conducted. Thank God for the Korean Navy captains. They said that cannot be done. You can't even get ashore. You have to walk through 1,000 yards of mud flats. These guys did go in eventually, and they did eventually get to Kimpo. They secured Kimpo Airfield while the 5th Marines went into the northern part of Seoul. They worked with the Marines more than anything else.
So the book is about that?
This book came about, as I explained in the first chapter. When I went back into the Army in 1955, every place I'd go, I'd say, you guys remember an outfit called the GHQ Raiders? No, never heard of them. 2 of the guys that I talked to had been in GHQ with me. They were in the personnel section that selected these guys, and they were in the personnel section that processed them back into GHQ the following year. Yet they had no memory of them. So I don't remember those guys. Everywhere I went, nobody remembered them. Well, for 50 years, I thought, Ballow, you're gone daft. You dreamed us up. And then one day I got a message on the internet from a guy down in El Paso, Texas, Delmer Davis. Are there any surviving members of the GHQ Raiders out there? And I actually almost had a heart attack. After 50 years, it was the first time I've heard that word from somebody besides my mouth. I got a hold of Davis, introduced myself, offered my services. He sent me a list of the raiders, and I got busy tracking down raiders and getting documentation. The National Archives and I became very close, sometimes not so friendly, but they provided me far more than I thought. I got all the monthly reports from the Special Activities Group, which was their parent organization. I tracked down about 100 raiders. The following year, I attended a reunion in Colorado Springs. Now, I hadn't seen these guys in 50 years. So I walked into the hotel and I said, hey, Raider unit having a Raider company having a reunion? And they said, well, I think they're having coffee in that room over there. I walked in, and as soon as I walked in that door, I knew exactly who I was looking at. And they welcomed me. They were older. I couldn't really identify them and say, well, this guy was such and such at that time. But when I heard their names, I knew who they were. I remember this guy, I remember that guy, I remember this report, this guy's name was on it. And I had all their old reports. I had their day-by-day journals, where they were and what they were doing, who did what. I had it all with me.
Wow.
the next day at the round table, I said, I showed them all these reports I had on them. And I said, guys, you've been telling each other your war stories on the internet for months. If you don't permanently record these, they're going to be lost. Tell you what I'll do. You get copies of all your reports that you've written to each other, letters you've written to each other, and send them to me. And I'll compile them for you. And that was the birth of this book. This is not, I'm very little of this is actually, did I write? It should say down here, it should say compiled by, because this is their stories.